Welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. This is Fiorenza and I'm your host. The purpose of this podcast is to bring voices together to talk about belonging. Through inspiring, real-life conversations, we explore how belonging can show up in so many different ways, what it feels like to belong, and the impact of truly belonging. Each episode will offer you inspiration and practical strategies to find your true voice in your life and as a leader. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. Today I'm joined by Febronia Ruocco. Hi!
Hi, Fiorenza.
Febronia is a global strategic insights and analytics director, and she's also an executive leadership coach and professional mentor. So there's a double hat here, perhaps more than double. I would love to hear about your professional journey and perhaps what does the day-to-day look like for you, Febronia?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I was really excited to come and speak to you, also knowing that you're a fellow coach as well. So really looking forward to the conversation. So my journey. So I've been in the marketing industry for probably just over 20 years now, working, leading insight teams for big brand portfolios across a variety of categories. And I've worked on a lot of big brands. You can see them on my LinkedIn profile. And I love supporting teams, supporting the stakeholders, working on the different insight projects to find those opportunity areas for customer growth. So really passionate about that. And it's something I'm really just as passionate today as I was 20 years ago. I love it because marketing is constantly evolving. The trends are constantly changing, customers are evolving, and the technology that we use is evolving. And at the moment, we have fantastic opportunities with AI and the new AI technology. And then segueing from that, coaching is a natural kind of progression as well, because we do a lot of team coaching and stakeholder management in the insight space. So I trained as a coach 2 years ago at Henley Business School, did my certification and then a postgrad certificate, and then went on to do my accreditations with the ICF and EMCC. And that's ticking along quite nicely alongside it. I'm very passionate about helping others fulfill their career goals and aspirations. So they kind of slot quite nicely together, very complementary. So that's my career journey in a nutshell.
Absolutely. So you're quite busy.
Oh, yes, you asked me about the day-to-day. Currently, I'm not in a marketing role, so I'm looking for my next marketing assignment. So I have a bit more time to focus on coaching and mentoring. And I also do quite a few podcast discussions in the industry. I'm quite interested in all the hot topics and trends. And also coaching development. You'll know, being ICF accredited yourself, there's a lot of continuous development. So doing all of that in the background as well. I think I'm attending a talk this evening with the ICF.
The opportunities to develop further as coaches are, to be honest, infinite, I think.
You never stop, do we?
It can be a rabbit hole. I've been down the rabbit hole for sure.
Well, because I had time on my hands at the beginning of the year, I got my accreditation, my ACC last year, and I thought I'm going to use this time and get most of my points together, ready for my next renewal, which is not for 3 years. But I thought, do it while you have the time, because when you're busy doing a marketing job, there isn't the time in the day to do all the coaching development. So I'm quite lucky that I can juggle the two alongside my, time and calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done on juggling the two. It's not
That's
always
hard
that
though,
easy.
even so.
So today we wanted to talk about self-advocacy, and I'm very excited to dive into this topic with you. What makes this topic important for you, Febronia?
I think I'm going to try and go a bit deeper than I usually do on podcasts, because I think working with you today, and you being of Italian origin, you'll understand this. I grew up with a mum who was from a generation who weren't good at self-advocacy. They basically were very focused on family, other people's needs, caregiving, and giving to the community and everybody else. And it seemed that the last person on the list was often herself. And although she claimed it didn't upset her or that she enjoyed it, I think deep down there was a little bit of resentment. And now, since I'm a coach, I coach a lot of female leaders who often talk about this imposter syndrome, not feeling good enough. And I don't think it is imposter syndrome. I think it's more systemic, something that's been passed down the generations. You know, even in different cultures, women have traditionally been very focused on looking after everybody else. So we're not very good at expressing our own needs, and especially with careers in corporate organizations, you have to be the master of your own destiny. You have to keep on top of your own development. You have to ask for training. You have to ask for promotion. You know, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And it's something that we're just not very good at.
So our cultural influences are probably, they have a big role into the way that we self-advocate, the way perhaps that we take space as well. Would that be fair?
I think so. And obviously there are differences across cultures, and it's very impacted by generations. So the Gen Z today are much more powerful in expressing their needs and where, you know, what they want, what they will do, what they won't do. But my generation is probably still coping with a lot of these limiting beliefs, which are at an unconscious level. They're unconscious biases that we kind of believe the negative rather than look at the positive. So, you know, if you want to go for a promotion, you might automatically think, why should I ask about that? Because they probably won't give it me anyway. I'm probably not good enough. Rather than think, oh, this could be an opportunity for learning. The company might be excited that I'm expressing interest. So we tend to deviate naturally to the negative before we go to the positive. And I think it's an off spill from previous generations and traditions of caregiving that women have had instilled in them. And, you know, they've done a tremendous job, and I'm not shaming women in any way because it's all historic. It's all evolution at different points in society's progression. So, you know, we have to be grateful to those who came before us, the generations before us, because they've opened the way up for us today as we have for Gen Z. So it's all spoken about with compassion from my part. But understanding this, I often question when somebody comes to me for coaching and says, I've got imposter syndrome. It makes me think, have you really? Or is it a limiting belief that isn't actually your belief to have?
Yeah. And you're quite right in, you know, when you mentioned the role that each generation has. I really think that each generation has worked very hard on some beliefs, on some societal norms, right? If we start perhaps with the baby boomers, right? They've been the catalyst for so much change, right?
Yes.
And then Gen X benefited from those changes, but also led some changes themselves, and then millennials, and then Gen Z. So yes, for sure, Gen Z is in a much better space in a way, right? And what baby boomers were or Gen X is. There's still work to be done.
Yes.
And we were chatting about this offline, you and I, how we might, and I think it goes back to what you shared just now. Sometimes we are actually carrying stuff, beliefs that has been transmitted to us from our upbringing or even what we've heard
Yes.
our mom say, our grandma say. What are your thoughts on that, Febronia?
Oh, this is a deep one, because if I think about my grandmother, if she were still here today, she would just say, "But you're not married," rather than, "You've had an amazing career." So she would still hold the values of her time. But I think it's interesting what you're saying about Gen X and Gen Z, because I think I'm Gen X, if I'm not incorrect. And we have been trailblazers. We have opened up the way. We have been a bit rebellious. And we started the kind of movement towards building careers and then trying to fight for the right for women to be able to go part-time and have a family and all of that. So we have done a lot.
Yeah.
But Gen Z, and although they get criticized, they have boundaries. We were never good at setting boundaries. So we were trailblazers, but we tended to be overworked because we would take more on to prove our value, to prove our worth. But Gen Z seems to be to have this innate confidence that they say, "No, I'm not doing that."
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a millennial, and I remember when I started in 2010, I started working in London in an investment bank, and you are not really, I mean, there wasn't space for you as a new joiner, starting at the very bottom of the scale to have boundaries. Your boss, was
Yeah.
telling you to finish this report, up until 8, 9. Well, you just had to do it.
Yes.
And that was just the way. And if you were to rebel, then you knew that you wouldn't have a permanent position at the end, or at least that's very much how it felt. And that isn't just me. And it was a shared feeling because we were talking about it. So I am in awe, actually, seeing how those entering the workforce now are able to stand for themselves a bit better than what I did.
But I think Gen Z have had the benefit of the technological revolution. So they've grown up with all the media platforms, all the different messaging. So they've been influenced in a very different way. So, when I think back to when I was at university, we were doing everything manually, writing essays by hand. We were collecting books from the library, carrying them up the hill. It was manual labor as well as academic. So very different times. And I'm sure that they'll find their way. But I think Gen Z are challenged in a different way, that the working environment, the pace is inordinately fast.
Yeah.
So higher risks of burnout, higher risks of, getting poorly in different ways. And also progressing your career is also challenging for them. So, every generation has its own challenges and positives and negatives. And I think it's important to always look at it compassionately.
For sure. Compassion is so important. And eh, often there's some self work involved, to enable us to find that compassion aspect, especially if it relates to our parents or, those that we grew up with. Yeah, that's such a great point. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the link with belonging? If we are able to self-advocate for ourselves, or if we are not yet able to self-advocate, um, what's the link with belonging, or what's the impact on belonging?
I think when I can only speak for myself and the journey I've been on, probably in the last 10 years, really understanding my heritage, my background, my history. In order to feel belonging, you have to have self-awareness. You have to understand where you've come from, how that's influenced who you are and where you're going. So in my particular journey, I've unpicked a lot of, that was my mum's stuff, that was my grandmother's stuff. It's not my stuff. I respect and love them for who they were and how they took care of me within the scope of their generational environment. But I'm a woman from a different generation and I have different ambitions, and being okay with that. And I think once you've done that work and you're okay with who you are and what you want, then you feel belonging because you belong within your own skin. You're authentic. and you're living your own life, and you're living in alignment with your own values and beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's complex work, but unpicking these false beliefs, they're not mine. So for example, my mum's generation had a lot of scarcity mindset. Play it small, don't attract attention to yourself, keep safe, because that's what they had to do in their environment. So if you carry those points of view forwards, you won't put yourself forward, you won't self-advocate, you won't go for bigger jobs. You'll always play it safe. So unpicking that, and learning the world is abundant, there's enough for everybody. I can fulfill my potential, go for bigger career opportunities. Some may work out, some may not, but that's okay. It's all part of the experience. I think the previous generations had a fear of failure, but also a fear of success.
That is true. That is quite true, actually. Yeah. How did you know that you had found belonging in your own skin? What did that look like for you?
I
What were
think
the
I'm still working on it because it's a big background. I come from a very big Italian heritage from the south of Italy. So I'm picking what was their cultural dynamic versus my own growing up in the UK and being okay with it. And I've done a lot of work and looked at the history, the socioeconomics, the socio-political environment, and really understood some of the behaviors of the females that were caregivers in my life and understanding where they came from. And I'm at the stage now saying that was theirs, not mine. And I don't need to prove myself according to those values. And I guess for every female, whichever culture she's from, it's a piece of work that helps you understand yourself, the influences that drive you at a subconscious level. Because we're not conscious we're doing it. Have you ever been in a situation where you've done something or said something and you thought, oh my God, I've become my mother?
For sure. And sometimes,
And sometimes it's great.
yeah, sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's less great.
Well, sometimes it's self-limiting because that's something that they thought within the context of their system. But it's an ongoing journey, and I journal, I read a lot, and I'm learning a lot. And obviously, the reflective practice we have in coaching helps me reflect and reassess some of the thoughts that I'm having. But I think it's a life journey.
It really is. It really is. And new phases of life as well can then bring a different aspect, a different angle to your own belonging.
Absolutely. I'm not a mother, but I am an auntie of 5 nieces and nephews, so I've been involved in seeing them all grow up. But also for women who are becoming mothers in these new times, with all the different challenges we have around us. It's all constantly evolving, as you probably know yourself.
It's definitely a big topic, a big thing to go through this matrescence in this day and age, and carry all the things that you wanna continue doing from your family heritage, and also all the things that you wanna do differently.
Absolutely.
And it's about finding the right balance, and also, at least for me, accepting that not everything is gonna be, not everything that you want to do differently is easy to do, easy to implement, and you can make mistakes, and that's okay. It doesn't define you as
Yeah.
not the parent that you want to be. You do get another chance tomorrow and the day after, and you can do
Yeah.
better. Yeah. Perhaps moving on to workplaces. You've worked in a few workplaces from what you shared earlier. What would you say helps in fostering environments where people, or women perhaps in more particularly, feel that they have the space to advocate for themselves?
I think this is a complex question and it's multi-layered because some organizations have cultures that welcome a little bit more independence and authenticity, and others are a little bit more constraining, and I have to be honest. So I think, and also individuals, some may feel very comfortable bringing their full self to work. Others maybe don't want to, and that's okay. So I think we have to be mindful that there's no right or wrong. But I'd say to any female who wants to be able to self-advocate in a multi-corporate or corporate environment, you have to understand the parameters of the context that you're in. You have to know what the bandwidth is, where the stretch is, and where there isn't, because you need to know what you're up against and how much of that you can effectively change. And also having great mentors, a support network of women within the org, and men. There are lots of men who are fantastic advocates of female empowerment. Having a network of support is incredibly important, but doing your work, so understanding what you want to achieve and also understanding and overlaying that with what is theoretically possible within the environment that you're in, because that's going to influence no matter what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you know whether you belong in a space, workplace, or a group? Are there...
I think your nervous system tells you. If you find yourself going into fight or flight regularly and your cortisol is going up, then you're not doing your health any good, because obviously your body's reacting to the environment. So being able to be calm, measured, collaborative, being in ventral vagal state of connection in the nervous system allows you to do your best work. But if you're constantly going into fight or flight, then you have to really take a step back and say, should I be here, or are there any behaviors I can adapt to make this work? So understanding what's triggering for you if you're being triggered, and is it something you can manage and discuss and resolve, or do you have to get out?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Febronia, for being with me on the podcast and answering those questions. I appreciate that. The questions were a little bit complex, so
Yeah, we went
thank you
deep
so
today.
much. Thank you, Febronia.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with your friends and network. As an independent podcaster, your reviews and engagement really supports the podcast. We also stream on Substack now, where you can join in for extra content and conversations on today's topic and more. See you soon.